everyone. This is Michael, and welcome to our triangle meditation and the Ask Meditations for this coming week. I'll be substituting for Tuya through this week, and we'll do the best I can under the circumstances. I'd like to begin by reading to you a few of the things that Master DK is talking about in the externalization of the hierarchy. He anticipated the coming of an avatar, a greater avatar, and a lesser avatar that would embody the energy of the greater one and reach the physical plane. Now, excuse me, this was written mostly in 1941, right in the middle of Second World War, and it was not determined who that avatar would be, whether it would be the Christ or someone the Christ assigned, who would be the representative of what is called the avatar of synthesis, who could descend no lower than the mental plane. And yet an avatar was needed, of course, on the dense physical plane. So I found it very interesting. Actually, it's a section that I've been working through in the video commentaries I've been making, and already there are about 32 programs there which you can find on Makara website and increasingly on the YouTube website, and it's really worth studying this book, The Externalization of the Hierarchy, because it shows us how the Master thinks and how the hierarchy thinks about human possibilities. So, let me go ahead here in just a moment. Every possible step has been taken by hierarchy to enable the avatar, the coming one, to appear. That's both the avatar of synthesis and his representative, who can reach as far as the physical plane, whereas the avatar of synthesis himself can reach no lower than the mental plane. What these steps are cannot be declared here. I guess we simply have to take, on faith that this was done, and it turned out, we learned 4 years later, to be a successful linking up with the planetary logos, and even at the time this was being written, with the Christ. Only some questions suggesting possibility are permissible. Now he asks some questions to have us search our minds as to what we think. But of course we know the linking up did occur. So this is the way 4 years before it really happened that DK was thinking. Think you that his body of manifestation is already on Earth, waiting to be overshadowed, inspired, and used at the right time, as was the vehicle of the Master Jesus by the Christ? And apparently this is so. because indeed the Christ had his Maya Varupa, and that vehicle was on earth, and the decision was being made whether the Christ would be the representative of this great, well, DK calls him a cosmic avatar, the avatar of synthesis. There are those who say that it is waiting, and has been waiting for 22 years. Now, this was written in the spring of 1941, I think. Anyway, in the middle of 1941. So that took us back to the year 1919, which was very interesting because that is the year that the Tibetan linked up with Alice Bailey and began the dictation work. And we learn in various places that the Christ has been working with this avatar of synthesis, and that the avatar has been strengthening him even before the official triangle of the avatar, the Spirit of Peace, and the Buddha was said to be surrounding the Christ. And that was more in 1945 when the great invocation was given out. The third and greatest of the invocations, the one that we customarily use. Then the Tibetan goes on, is it possible that there will be a sudden descent of the Prince of Light and Peace to change present conditions by the effectiveness of his radiance and his message? Well, he says, yes, there are those who look for him to suddenly appear, and they number millions of expectant people. Now, I'm sorry for my morning voice here. What we learn is that it's a much more gradual process, and as we study the various essays as they go on in this book, The Externalization of the Hierarchy, we learn that before the Christ can appear, much has to be done in the 5 planetary centers regarding the masters taking their positions surrounded by their initiates and disciples, and questioned as to their wisdom, because the humanity who is aware of their presence looks to them for wise counsel. Now, that is a gradual process. It's not a sudden dramatic descent. But when he talks about the Prince of Light and Peace, well, one of the names of the Christ is the Prince of Peace. And he says also, the Christ says, I am the light of the world. So obviously he's saying that this second and lesser avatar, who represents the avatar of synthesis, there's a very good possibility that it will be the Christ. And we have learned in subsequent messages over the years, the 8 years remaining from 1941 to 1949, when Alice Bailey passed on and the second installment transmissions were completed. We've learned indeed that the representative is the Christ. Some say he is already on his way. These are the various points of view, you know. We know that the Christ has his Maya Varupa, his will-created body, that he has never left humanity, and it's just a question of his reappearance before humanity, so that every eye shall see him. Is it possible, the Tibetan goes on questioning, that this Wesak festival will see him approach nearer to the hierarchy and make a contact with them. Now this begins to sound like the greater avatar, but perhaps it is also the Christ who can come into more intimate terms yet with the hierarchy of light and love which he supervises. And the Tibetan goes on and says, well, some say it will take place. Then another question: can the massed intent of humanity evoke response and lead to the appearance on earth of the lesser avatar, which is a way of saying, can Christ be invoked with such strength that the lesser avatar will actually appear visibly on the earth? Maybe it was not entirely decided whether that would be the method when this was written. And some say, says the Tibetan, nothing can stop it. I guess he's asking his students to position themselves with respect to their expectations. Prophecy, expectation, and the present time cycle testify to the opportunity. Now, this is an important sentence from him. This possible dual event, a twofold event, the coming of the avatar of synthesis to the hierarchy, and of the lesser avatar, his representative to humanity, can be a probable happening if the world disciples and aspirants measure up to their opportunity. Well, apparently they did, despite many obstacles, measure up to the opportunity. There was a question earlier whether that invocation backed by the massed intent of humanity would be strong enough to reach in either one of the avatars, and especially the avatar of synthesis. But the Tibetan said a most interesting thing. He says, when I give out the new invocation, which is, in this case, the great invocation with which we are very familiar, when I give out the new invocation, because he already had given out two of them, it will be a signal to you that the avatar of synthesis has linked up with the planetary logos. Now, so great is this cosmic avatar that the planetary logos takes his position within the presence of this avatar of synthesis. And yet some aspect of the avatar is working through the world's savior, the Christ. So the Christ must be, his mission must be very important for such a cosmic being to attend to the Christ and to arrange that his energy will flow through the Christ. So this is a great triangle at this time, and when the Tibetan begins to write once again around the year 2025, he will give us, I think, a historical review and perhaps tell us something about how this triangle has been working during the intervening 75 years. So all of this is part of the study of the science of triangles. Now we will continue our work. And in our meditation, breathe in the white light. A few times and inaudibly sound the Om. And we think about the Tibetan's instructions about how to begin the day. I would ask you, he says, for a few minutes each morning prior to doing the group meditation, to rest quietly back in your chair or bed and, closing your eyes, link up with your soul and with me, your friend. You will thus create a triangle of light between your soul, your head center, and myself, he says. Fix and hold this triangle firmly in your consciousness through the power of the creative imagination. And here is the image. See it as a solid triangle of light and not just an outline. Visualize the base of the triangle on the mental plane where Master DK works and where dwells and works your soul. And by this we mean the angel of the presence. And the lower point or apex touches the top of your head. So we'll visualize that. And then we see pouring down via the triangle a stream of light, golden in color and not white. It is more light orange than white. And we see it flooding the whole body. And when we have visualized this as perfectly as possible, then he advises us rest back in that light and bathe in it as you would bathe in the waters of the sea. We can see that this is kind of an infusion exercise. Now the Tibetan goes on, see it permeating every part of your physical equipment. And let it do its work without your having any definite ideas as to what should be accomplished. And he says, the rest of the activity is in my hands, and you can safely leave it to me. He goes on, this exercise will aid you in handling your life problem and your service until such time as you enter into that light wherein consciousness awakens free from the bonds of flesh. The blessing of your co-disciples is upon you, and yours upon them. Now, after we've reached a poised stage, holding the consciousness steadily in the mind and not in the head, we contact the spiritual triplicity, which is that which, quote, hovers over the square and radiates the energy of light into the waiting field of active thought. So we want to have the mind held steadily in the light of the soul. We contact this higher aspect infusing our nature. Now, we focus on our own triangle or triangles, depending. We might have one, we might have a few, we might have many. And we start with the premise that energy follows thought. And we call upon our triangle group members by name and with love. And we'll keep a few minutes of silence here to do this as we visualize the flow of love and goodwill passing between the members of our triangle or triangles. And as this energy is passing through our own little network of triangles, we feel how this energy is helping to change the square-like etheric field into a field of triangles. Spiritual light, spiritual love is passing through. And there's an increasing livingness now in the network, our own little network, and the greater network, which we also visualize covering the entire Earth, the greater network of triangles. We want to feel the vivification of this work, of the triangles with which we are involved, and of the entire network. And somehow, very high in Shambhala, we realize that this whole triangles network is under the eye of the three Buddhas of activity. They embody the intelligence aspect, and they are of such an exalted nature, sacrificing themselves for our particular planet, that they were planetary logoi in the previous solar system. So this rises to a very high point, and perhaps in the middle of every triangle, eventually, not only the Christ, but eventually Sanat Kumara himself, when later the triangles of will are formed. So there's the connection, our own little network, the network of global triangles, and the three Buddhas of activity. And in times of emergency, we've been told the Buddhas can use this triangles network for the welfare of humanity and the planet. It is a work which must go on, says the Tibetan. So somehow the livingness of the whole network dawns upon us, and we see it becoming ever more vital. Now, part of our triangles work is when we have seen the light and love flowing through the triangles in which we are participating and through the entire network, we will be sounding the great invocation. That's an important part of the work, and so let us concentrate upon that now. The sounding of the great invocation. so we see a global network of triangles covering the entire planet, linking people, communities, nations, continents. It is a factual, etheric organism. It is alive and must continue, and it substands and underlies our world affairs, reconditioning human interaction until it becomes right human relations under the influence of the soul. We visualize at least 100,000 vital living triangles in this transition from the square to the triangle. And we attempt to see the Earth as truly a sacred planet and humanity redeemed. It is an inevitability in a way, but much of the time equation will be in our hands. And so we sound the sacred word 3 times, bringing together the spirit, the soul, and the body of humanity. Thank you, friends, for being here with us, and we will continue our ask work. But tonight, you know, on Wednesdays we always have 2 according to our new schedule, and one is a broadcast like this, and the other is a webinar, and we will go deeply into this wonderfully mysterious science of triangles using the 100 pages or so dedicated to it in the book Esoteric Astrology. And when that is concluded, and it will not be concluded shortly, there's much more to study in terms of the triangular linking up on our planet. Of course, it goes far beyond our planet, doesn't it? Far beyond. And so many great energy centers, many times greater than our sun, are linked up via the triangles.